Hi, I'm Professor Jim Seevers. I will be teaching Congressional Influence on U.S. Foreign Policy in the spring. The most important thing I want the students to take away from this class is an understanding of why it is such a mess in Washington and with Congress right now, how this affects foreign policy, how we got to this situation, and what might be done about it. In order to do that, we have to spend some time thinking about the history of Congress's role in foreign policy. We have to think about the overall framework, both constitutional and political, within which Congress operates on foreign policy, and then really drill down and look at the specific tools that Congress has at its disposal to influence foreign policy, and also spend time thinking about all the different groups out there, whether they be foreign governments or lobbying organizations, you name it, who are trying to influence the Congress. Well, it's often said that politics stops at the water's edge. It's also often said that the president really controls foreign policy. At the same time, we know that politics often doesn't stop at the water's edge, and it really influences foreign policy. And we know that Congress has a major role in lots of foreign policy decisions that are made in the United States. Bottom line is, if most things that the president needs to do that require some kind of support or action by Congress, whether it's spending money or approving a treaty or approving a nomination, require support from Congress. So the basic thing is that it's really hard to understand U.S. foreign policy without getting an appreciation of what Congress is doing. So I would say that any student who's either going to work directly in foreign policy, either as a U.S. diplomat or as a foreign diplomat, or who's going to be working in Washington as an analyst or a lobbyist, or any kind of activity that is trying to understand U.S. foreign policy, really needs to have a good appreciation of Congress's role. For the past 10 years, I've had the privilege of serving as the Director of Studies and Training at the Georgetown School of Foreign Service Institute for the Study of Diplomacy. One of our major missions at the Institute is to think about ways to improve the conduct of foreign policy. Certainly understanding Congress's role in foreign policy is a major part of that, so it's something that I think about every day. Prior to coming to Georgetown, I was a U.S. diplomat for 15 years, and prior to that, a presidential management, what was then called intern. And through those experiences, I had the opportunity to work 2 separate times for U.S. senators on national security and foreign policy. I had the opportunity to work at the Congressional Research Service on foreign policy, and I also worked in the State Department's Bureau of Legislative Affairs, which are essentially the lobbyists for the State Department on Capitol Hill. So this class is definitely a seminar class with a heavy emphasis on participation by the students. The readings are very important, but given that this subject is not one that has a huge amount of theoretical literature about it, the readings are going to be very targeted and concise and practical, talking about usually how Congress is actually working in the real world on foreign policy. And then there'll be some reading that tries to give us some historical perspective about how Congress is working. In terms of the assignments, it's going to be different this year than it was in past. And the main difference is going to be that I'm going to try using something called a policy task force approach that is employed up at the Princeton Woodrow Wilson School. And the idea there is that you spend most of the semester in a traditional seminar, interactive, learning about the different aspects of the subject that you're studying. But the papers are going to be, it's going to be a substantial policy memo that's going to be the main focus of the assignment, where each student will choose a different part of the issue of Congress and foreign policy and really the problems that we're facing over it. And they're going to further research that and then make a presentation about it to the class during the semester. But then, to take it one step further, We're going to have the class basically function as a policy task force or as a commission where they're integrating some of the ideas that they come up with in their individual papers and integrated into one report that would then be presented to a panel outside the classroom. The main bulk of the grading for all this would be on the individual paper, but of course the way that the integrated report comes out would also be important.